All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Global Renaissance podcast, where we just talk about the different ways people are navigating this thing called life. Now, today we have a very special guest, the Poetic Artiste. Leslie, how you doing today?
I'm really, really, really good. Feels good to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Now, just introduce yourself. Like, what is it that you do? Who are you? Where you come from? Like, give people a little insight into you.
All right, awesome. Well, I was born and raised in Boston. I am a self-taught artist. So I perform poetry, spoken word, and I paint.
And we got some paintings in the background. And so I think it's dope that you paint because I mean obviously it's called the Global Renaissance and there's a lot of painting going on. Now, when did you start painting?
I started painting in 2016.
Okay. And what inspired you to start?
It has been something that I have always just, wanted to do. My father's an artist as well.
Okay.
So I feel like it's kind of just in my genes,
Mhm.
and I feel like it's challenging. So
Mhm.
being self-taught, I learned everything I could on my own
Mhm.
and by researching or going to shows and learning from other artists. So
Mhm.
it's been a really cool journey.
Mhm. So why go the self-teaching route as opposed to maybe going to your father and saying, "Hey, can you teach me something?" What was it, something about just agency, or what made you go that route instead of finding maybe a teacher or a mentor or something like that?
Well, my father lives in Trinidad,
Okay.
so you know, I'm not in, I like hands-on. So
Mhm.
I'm sure he could teach me some things, but if I'm not there actually learning with somebody in front of me, it's not the same.
Mhm.
And I actually did take a couple classes,
Okay.
art classes too. I even moved to Maryland for about 3 years, and I was taking art classes out there with a couple of different galleries, having my first shows.
Mhm.
So, I definitely had a lot of hands on.
Okay. And so for you, if you could bring it back, like when did you kind of realize that it was something you were interested in? So you started painting in 2016. Did you
hmm
kind of have an inkling towards, hey, this is something that I like, or you were always interested in paintings and visual art, or was that something that kind of came about later?
That is something I've always been interested in. I've been drawing since I was very, very young. I still have my old sketchbook.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, it was always, like pen, paper, pencil, paper, colored pencils. I never thought about actually painting
Mm-hmm.
with a brush. So it was definitely a change because I think learning how to draw first helped me learn how to paint
Mm-hmm.
today. So yeah,
Were you the kid who was always drawing on like your papers in school?
yeah, I definitely was everything,
Mm. Yeah, I
everything.
used to get jealous of those kids because I would doodle, but I could only draw triangles, so it
Uh huh.
sucked. But I would get jealous of you guys because y'all got talent. Now, um, in terms of like the content of your painting,
hmm
would you say there's an overarching theme of the things that you like to paint? Is it kind of diverse? How would you say you express yourself through your paintings in terms of just like what you're putting down on the paper in terms of content?
So I feel like I change what I'm doing with my art depending on how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off with some painting like this, abstract. This one's called Serene,
Mm-hmm.
and this was meant to be like a very peaceful painting because I like music, and I was like, she's playing a harp.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some self-love pieces. I did some pieces I want to be intimate, and I did this one that's called Secret, where I'm just kind of like, just admiring just the female like femininity, and also keeping it simple. This is something you can have almost anywhere
Mm-hmm.
in your house. I also paint abstract pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I paint animals. Um, but now that it has like become a business, I also try to cater to what my audience wants,
Mm-hmm.
and it changes over time. I used to sell this one a lot. Now I'm selling way more of these, so I paint more similar to this than I do
Mm-hmm.
that.
Do you have a favorite, like in
I
terms
do
of
have a
style?
favorite. Yeah, I like to paint erotica.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so take me into the process of that because I think that's an interesting space to be in because obviously in society, sexual acts and things like that are kind of taboo, right? So you're
Mhm.
painting those, you're displaying them. What goes into one creating a work like that and then maybe marketing it? What's the response you got maybe the first time you put something like out and then now what does it look like?
You know, when I have shows, I get certain people who kind of shy away from my table.
Mhm.
but then they're always looking back, like they
Mm-hmm.
want to come over, and I'll greet them, I'm like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to take a look, you can come closer, like that. And they always end up coming back, but sometimes I do get stares, like, hey, is she drawing like, or is that actually her, or is she drawing a different person?
Mm-hmm.
But so far the erotica pieces sell very well.
Mm-hmm.
People enjoy them. I feel like at this point I can't make enough of them in
Mm-hmm.
time to cater to what
Mm-hmm.
I'm selling. But I also have them on lighters, notebooks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when I'm painting erotica, I don't know what if I have something that I specifically think of when I'm painting. I'm very picky on the colors. Like this one, it's called Unveiled Beauty. This is actually one of the first painting I ever did.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted very vibrant colors. I didn't want to do anything that might look too erotic. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a nice middle line
Mm-hmm.
from what I could do and what I'm doing now. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
it.
that's the one you use as like your avatar on like Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the first one that I saw, and I think it's again, like you said, people are drawn to it, but then they always have that kind of thing in the back of their head, like, oh, I shouldn't enjoy this, and I think that's a
Mhm.
super interesting thing that people are able to do through your work is kind of explore that internal battle of like, I'm drawn to it, but now I feel this kind of societal pull away from it. And then you kind of play that intermediary part of not only actually creating the work, but then invite them over, like, hey, you can actually check this out. It's
Yeah.
okay. So I think that's a really dope thing that you're doing. Now I remember, so you also do poetry,
Mhm.
and you had an event. We'll talk about the events in a second, but at the last event you did, I think a lot of the poetry people were doing was also kind of in that erotica space as well. Do
Mhm.
you find that there are parallels between the work you create, with your paintings as well as the poems you're creating?
Sometimes. I have a lot of different poems. If I'm doing certain events and catering to a certain audience, I might not do some of my deeper poems.
Mm-hmm.
For my brunch event, I didn't want to do a poem that might make people sad because I'm like, that energy is not something I want to leave people with
Mm-hmm.
for the event. So I did something I feel like might get people a little bit more hype, interested.
Mm-hmm.
The crowd was going after a couple of the pieces. But I have my Art of Love event coming up that I'm going to do more love
Mm-hmm.
poems. So it definitely depends on the audience I'm catering to at that time.
Okay. And take me into the process of like creating a poem, for example. Like, do you
Hmm.
sit down and say, hey, I have this topic weighing on my mind. I'm going to write about it. Do you sit down and say, I want to write something and just wait for the inspiration? Like, what does that process actually look like when it comes to you writing a poem?
For me, I don't really write when I'm writing poems. I'll freestyle it
Okay.
in a voice note. And then I'll go back, listen to it. I'll pick the parts that I want, and then I'll write it down.
Okay.
And then I'll edit it from there.
Okay. That's dope. That's dope. So when do you feel like the inspiration comes? Like again, do you sit down and say,
Mhm.
I'm gonna put something on, then you go freestyle? Do you be in the car and you're just like, oh, I thought of something, you just pull
Yeah,
out the voice note?
it's at any time of the day. I
Mm-hmm.
might think of a line. I'm like, oh, I gotta use that. Record it. Write it down in the voice note.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I'm stressed out and sometimes it's like a topic I want to talk about, I might get into a mood where I am sitting in the car by
Mm-hmm.
myself, listening to music. I'm like, damn, maybe I should just speak, into the microphone on
Mm-hmm.
my phone, record it, and see what comes out. And that's been some of my best pieces, when it's just free like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I write raps every so often, and one thing, I used to be a heavy writer because I was a school kid, so I went hard in school, and so I went to a school where writing was like a big thing. So I learned how to write, and so I kind of took that process and translated it into rapping. So I used to write a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
recently I would be in the car and I'd be playing a beat, and I'm like, I can't write it down because I'm driving, and so I
Yeah.
started employing that process, and I think it kind of frees up your mind to really just go, and I think that's a beautiful thing. As far as poetry, was that something, did you start that around 2016 too? Is that something you've been doing longer, shorter? What's been your journey with being a poet?
A little bit longer. I started writing poetry in 2013. I actually started writing poetry because I was going through like a really depressed state because I
Mm-hmm.
had lost one of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And she had always told me that I need to kind of get out my shell because I could be very shy. And it's
Mm-hmm.
actually hard to go up on stage in front of so many people and perform. And, after she passed away, I was like, damn, like, I need to really, I believe what she said. I should put myself out there. If I want to write a poem and go to open mic, I shouldn't be afraid to go on stage. I feel like, it was actually the same day of her funeral where I actually performed for the first time a poem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like in a way that was like a tribute to her.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I just kept trying because, you know, at first, you know, I wasn't really that good at my poetry. I personally didn't enjoy it. I feel like I got a lot better over time,
Mm-hmm.
more confident, better with my eye contact with the audience. But, you know, it took many years to get there. It wasn't like an automatic talent. And with spoken word poetry, it's almost like you're kind of rapping too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I don't even know like the gist of how to set up things and rhyme schemes, stuff like that. So I had to learn more too. If I want to do it on with a beat or with music, you know, there's so many different ways you could twist it. And then I also want to have my own sound. I don't want to sound like every other spoken word poet that I
Mm-hmm.
hear, you know.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that originality is important because again, when we were at that event, your stuff definitely stood out, and so I think that's definitely something that you've developed now. As far as inspirations go,
Mm-hmm.
do you have anybody that you look at? Maybe okay, you don't want to copy their style exactly, but you look at them as like that's somebody that maybe I took some things from, I learned from, I just like their style, and as far as poetry or painting, any type of art.
Yeah, especially for the for poetry, there's this one really good spoken word poet called her name is Jeanette X, and
Mm-hmm.
her stage name is Genetics. She's amazing. Like she can memorize 8 minute poems and so passionate and powerful, and she's sold out audiences and like traveled across the world, you know, like that. And that's very admirable for me. So I was listening to her stuff, and I was thinking, you know, I can get a little bit deeper with my poems. I could be a little bit more vulnerable with
Mm-hmm.
my poems, and then that touches people because you never know what you're gonna say that could help somebody. You know, I have
Mm-hmm.
breakup poems where, you know, I see people crying in the audience afterwards, and they'll come up thanking me, like, you know what, I needed to hear what you had to say because if you went through it, I'm going through it. I feel like I can get through it because you got through it. You know, that's amazing to inspire someone in that way and to
Mm-hmm.
help somebody in that way.
That's a powerful thing. Do you remember, or is it hard to bring those deeper emotions? Like, let's say, for example, you went through a breakup. Do you find that harder to talk about than maybe something a little bit more positive? Has it gotten easier over time? What is your experience with bringing out those deep rooted emotions?
You know, the first time I perform a poem after a breakup, it's like I'm accepting that it happened and this is my way to release it and move past it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot harder. Like sometimes I get choked up on stage, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, After a while now, I feel like I'm still connected to the piece, but it's more in a way that I'm thinking I look back on this and I got over it and I'm fine now. So it's like a memory, but it's not in a way a bad memory because it's not still holding me back to this day. But definitely certain pieces are harder to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Anything breakup, I have, you know, I've had to do pieces about like sexual abuse. I've done pieces about just love in general and how this generation doesn't seem to want to be in committed relationships. Like I have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of pieces about everything that I've gone through, and I feel like people around me have gone through at this age and haven't been mature enough to kind of accept, acknowledge, and move forward with it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you're more reflective than the average person? Because this is just a personal opinion of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Having, I know a lot of people in artistic spaces, whether it be poetry, visual art, music, right? I tend to think, or I have this theory that people who write about themselves or create content or any type of work about themselves and what they're going through tend to be more reflective. Do you think you're more reflective than the average person who maybe doesn't have to go through this process of creating something from the heart like that?
I could say yes and I could say no.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's no way for me to know how someone else is being reflective compared to me just because I'm expressing myself
Mm-hmm.
through these forms. You know, I'm making my pain and my art public. Other people could be doing the same thing, but it could be private. You know, so I wouldn't say I'm doing more
Mm-hmm. For
than
sure.
someone else.
For sure.
Yeah.
Do you think it helps you to be able to have these avenues to express yourself as opposed to maybe just having to keep it in you? Do you think, have you seen yourself grow and develop at all personally through your art?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Art for me, you know, it wasn't just, you know, it's not just a business for me.
Mm-hmm.
In one way, it was a little bit of a hobby, but at the end of the day, it's a stress reliever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like people who go to the gym and feel that they feel better afterwards. When I paint, when I perform, I always feel lighter and happier afterwards. So it's definitely helpful for me.
Okay. Do you remember? You said so. The first time you performed was after your friend's funeral, or the same
Yeah.
day of your friend's funeral. Do you remember that feeling of first going up in front of people? Do you remember what that was like?
Yes, I remember what that was like. I mean, I was, in a way, I was numb. I was nervous. I had stage fright. I was shaking, my hands, my legs, and I was just trying to like relax and like breathe deeply. And I was doing a poem about self love. So I was just like, damn, I never talked about something like this before.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm doing it on a day where I was already emotional. So it was just like, it was just a lot of nerves. And, at the end of the day, like, there was like 50 people in the audience looking at me performing a poem for the first time. And I really wanted to just dedicate something to my friends. So I had to just, at the end of the day, get past it and get it out as best as I could. And actually, people enjoyed that piece.
Mm-hmm. How do you get over that kind of fear or anxiety that you might feel? I guess you could just call it stage fright.
Yeah.
How do you get over that? Is it just by doing it? Do you have tricks that kind of helped you over the years, or is it?
Yes, absolutely. There's tricks. For one, depending on the lighting, you don't even have to see people's faces in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
You could switch between people's faces, or you could look at a certain object at a wall. Um, for me, breathing helps. I'll take a second, to just take a breath because people don't know when there are pauses in your poem.
Mm-hmm.
If I take a pause, they're thinking, oh, this is just a pause in her piece. But sometimes I'm taking a pause because I'm like, all right, I feel my heart racing.
Mm-hmm.
I need a minute to relax. Let me take a deep breath. And I also think about the fact that, I could be saying something to help somebody. So I want to be able to make sure I'm doing my best. And also, if I have an event, like I'm giving people the show that they came to see.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a lot of different ways. I want to just make sure I satisfy every aspect of what I want to do.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about those events. Like I said, I went to your art. I don't. What did you call it?
The
The
poet,
artistic brunch.
yeah, open mic edition.
Yeah, it was fire. Where did that idea come from? When did you start them? Was that your first one? Have you done them before? That would be crazy if that was your first one because it was very well put together.
Thank
But
you.
where did that idea go from like, hey, I'm just gonna create art to now I'm gonna put these events together?
Okay, so I really this is not my first event. This is not my first brunch event. But, I started out doing like little ciphers at my house with
Mm-hmm.
friends. And then I moved to doing outdoor art shows. Then I moved to doing indoor art shows at galleries. And then I believe the poetry brunch was like my third or fourth show. And I was thinking, you know what, when I was living in Maryland, they always have these events where they have brunch. They have open mic performances and they have vendors. And I'm like, I want to bring that to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want to be able to support other black owned businesses. I was like, where can I find a black owned space? Modern Party Art was really good for the capacity that I wanted, and I always want to feel like my events are exclusive because they always sell out.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm only selling 50, 60 tickets for an event, people know that they're gonna have to buy it earlier. They're not gonna make it
Mm-hmm.
because I want my events to still be intimate. If I wanted to, I could have sold more tickets. I could have booked a bigger venue. But at the end of the day, am I going to be able to connect with everybody, have everyone mingle how I want them to mingle,
Mm-hmm.
and feel that vibe for later on, knowing that this is what they're going to get at my event?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was like one of my official first events, but technically my third or fourth one in Boston.
Mm-hmm. Can you maybe give us some insight? So how long were you in Maryland for?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. And what time period of your life was that?
So that was 2016 to 2019.
Okay. Can you talk about what that did for you? Was there something that you maybe noticed that that experience had that you wouldn't have gotten if you were just in Boston during that time period?
Yes, absolutely. There are so many young, black, talented professionals in the DMV area, especially DC, and they're always collaborating. I even have, my poets friends out there that are coming to my next show.
Mm-hmm.
They stay connected. They're flying out here just to perform here. They'll ask me to come down do their events, or I'll send them, some of my materials to show at their shows or to hang up my art. But it's just like I feel like not. I haven't met anyone right now in Boston who is doing an art and poetry show yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also feel like they have something every day of the week. If I wanted to go to open mic on a Monday, there was an event Mellow Mondays. Tuesday, there's like some event like Toxic Tuesdays. It's
Mm-hmm.
really funny. Um, every day of the week there was something going on, and the turnout was always amazing. You know, I feel like, and sometimes in Boston, I'm like, where can we go? Where is a space that we can have, especially right now with the pandemic, that we
Mm-hmm.
can actually go and share and be open, you know? So I feel like just my years being there just taught me that if I want to build a community, it's possible,
Mm-hmm.
even in a different city, even if it's in Boston, because, you know, people want to see this and they don't get it anywhere else, so they're going to come out for it.
For sure. And I was super excited when you said you were doing these because I literally had that thought of like, where is a space that creatives, black creatives can really just come together and share and collaborate? Because, you know, I know people, a lot of my friends who were in Boston, their criticism of the city is that people don't collaborate,
Yeah.
people don't show love. And I think part of that is a culture that, one, this isn't a black city. If you go somewhere like DC, there's more of that culture there. But I just think the fact that you were able to go there and then bring it back, I think that's super, super, super important. And like, I just wanted to applaud you for that because when you said, "Hey, I'm doing this event," I was super excited. I went, I was like, "Yo, this is amazing!" Like, just the energy for the fact that for me, I perform and I don't do poetry, but I was like, you know what? Why not?
That was
You know?
dope too.
And it was like everybody just showed love, and I felt super comfortable to be able to do it because I'm like, even if this sucks, people are still gonna, you know, show that love. So I think that was just one of the biggest things. Like, yo, you're really doing something for a larger culture, which I think, I don't know if you know like the type of impact that can have, but I just wanted to kind of shout you out for that just in person, because I think that's really dope. And it just goes to show that like going outside of your community, I think that's another thing that people don't do a lot. Like going outside, traveling, and really just taking different parts of different cultures and bringing them back. I think that's a prime example. So I think that's super, super dope. I had another question. I kind of forgot it, but I guess maybe talk about more so now, right? I guess as an artist, actually, I'm gonna pivot back. So with your events, I think there's an art to that, putting together an event, right? If anybody's ever hosted a party, you know, once you start putting the party together, it's a whole different kind of stress. Like, is everyone gonna have fun? Is everything in place, right? So how do you take your creative side, which is clearly there, and how do you put that towards creating an event and putting something together rather than just having a bunch of people in the space? Because we all know there's a difference between a good event and a bad event. You can have the same amount of people, but if the vibe isn't there, then it's not going to be the same. How do you go about setting that vibe?
So I try to always have some of my same artists perform, so they're familiar faces. I always try to perform. I also feel like I try to use a space that is artistic and open. And also people love to eat, so I'm like, you know, if there's food available and people didn't drink, you know, they're gonna vibe out a little bit more. You think curating the events is definitely not easy, especially being a full-time student. A lot of it I put together myself, but I actually have really great friends who help me out too, and they give me advice. I have like a business accountability meeting every month. I have worked with Black Owned Boston before, and I've met tons of vendors and got a lot of exposure from that. So when I was a vendor at those events, I was giving out my business card and telling them already, like, hey, I'm going to start having my events, you know, later this year if you want to check it out. You know, even if they Venmo me, Cash at me, you know, Venmo, I'll write a response like, hey, thank you so much for your purchase. So, you know, this date I'm going to have this show. So it's like people and energies who I've already met before, who I feel like this is someone I would want at my event, making sure they get that invitation to go, you know? And most of the people that go to my events, I know in some capacity, or they're a friend of a friend. You know, it's not too many times I have a random person who I've never seen before, you know, come to them yet with no, like, mutual friends. So I definitely feel like I do have a little bit of control over who has access to the events right now, because I do want to keep it exclusive, you know?
Yeah. And I think you pointed to something like, I think we've all heard the phrase, right? Your network is your net worth. But I think sometimes, especially if anybody's been like in a corporate environment, people network and it's kind of more of like almost like, what can you do for me type of thing. But I think what you're doing is like networking with intention, but also through a good energy. And I think that's one thing that if I could just, what I got from that event was great energy. And I think that's something super important. Can you talk about just how you assess that, right? Like, okay, this person has some good energy that I want to bring into my space. How do you go about kind of assessing that when you meet a person?
I For everyone who comes to my show, I actually look them up. If I could find them on Facebook or social media, that way I can see like who are they friends or friends with. Are they also an artist? Do they have a business? That way, when I meet them in person, I'm like, okay, I remember who this is. Like you, when I saw you in person, I was like, we didn't even meet before. If I saw
Mm-hmm.
you on Instagram, I'm like, oh yeah, I know who this is. Let me go say hi, check him out. I saw what you were doing. Like I reached out, and I'm like, okay, cool. I feel like that's something he might enjoy. Um, then I've had people who've come who are like vendors, and then they've had like friends of friends coming that were also business owners who I was able to connect with. So I feel like in a way, like I do have to go search for some people to see what they're kind of about, but also when people see what I'm doing, they already forward them over to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm already learning without having to do so much of a search for
Mm-hmm.
like-minded people,
Mm-hmm.
in the business, being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that works. Definitely speaks for itself. So we're gonna pause this. 'Cause I know that Karen's about to run out, and then we're gonna get into some more stuff. This has been great so far.
Awesome.
All right. All right. So, one thing that I really wanted to get into, because I think this is there's a key distinction between someone who makes art for fun and or any type of art, whether it's poetry, painting, music, anything like that, and somebody who's able to actually turn that into a business.
Mm-hmm.
When did that transition happen for you?
So I started selling my paintings immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I was very surprised because like I said, I had my first painting I sold, and it's still one of my most popular paintings to date. Um, Once I started posting pictures of my
Mm-hmm.
paintings online, people were offering to buy it. And I never thought that they would hit me up for that. And I'm like, okay, what should I do? Like, am I able to sell them? What is the process? So I didn't open and get like an LLC right away. I was just selling it kind of like as a sole proprietor. And then eventually I got my LLC.
Mm-hmm.
And now because I'm actually looking to buy my own art gallery, I've been able to like report what I'm making and my total profits or my losses and my consistency over 5 6 years now, so I can get a business loan
Mm-hmm.
because I want to buy my own space in Boston and do what I want to do without always having to rent and book dates far in advance
Mm-hmm.
for this. When I could do a pop up shop one day if I wanted to, or
Mm-hmm.
open mic night one day, or a paint night.
Mm-hmm.
People have been asking me for paint nights for a long time, and I just secured a spot where I can do it now. So it's like it definitely took time, but my first 3 months of painting, I made $5,000, and I didn't even think that I
Mm-hmm.
was gonna make that much in that short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I started taking it seriously. I was like, this is helping me pay for my education, and it's something I like to do, and I could do 3 4 paintings at one time. So
Mm-hmm.
why not take advantage of it? People actually enjoy it, so I just haven't stopped since.
Mm, that's super impressive. And one thing that I want you to maybe speak on, because I know there's a lot of people who are, they have talents, whether it be in an artistic space or elsewhere, but they're scared to share it. Can
Mm-hmm.
you maybe talk about overcoming that fear and what it felt like to have the gratification, not only that people liked it, but they were willing to spend their money on it and that it was actually helping you move forward?
So you're saying how to tell people how to promote themselves more?
Or just overcome that fear, because I think a lot of people just get stopped in the stage of like, hey, I have this stuff but I don't want to share it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm scared to share it because I'm scared about what the response might be. How do you get over that, and then how did it feel to you to know that, hey, when those messages started coming in like, hey, can I buy this, how did that feel to you?
It was definitely a good feeling, but it also had to teach me how to detach from my pieces because I was very connected to my paintings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say for people to speak on what they love to do. If it's something you really want to do and you enjoy it, the worst someone can say is no.
Mm-hmm.
They might not like it, but not everyone is gonna like what you do. You have to be confident enough in yourself where you're like, you know what, it doesn't matter what someone else may think about me and what I'm doing and my talent. This is what I enjoy, and this is what I want to show the world. So if I might have some bad critics, it doesn't matter if I get even one or two. Someone out there is usually bound to like what you're putting out into the world. And you're able to connect with people more too from that. So I would say just just do it. I can't even say like get over it necessarily, but I'm just like put it out there, see what happens, and if you don't get the response you want, you can make adjustments, or you can decide if you want to move forward or not. But I wouldn't be discouraged to not do it, because I'm like, imagine if I was discouraged in my artwork because I feel like it wasn't good enough. You know, I was selling my paintings for like $50, $100. I'm selling paintings for $1,000 now. What if I had stopped because one person may not have liked my work? You know, that could have happened when I got those odd looks when I did shows and people didn't want to come to my table. But I'm like, you know what? Even if you don't like it, someone else will. And I like what I do, so I don't have to have everybody like me.
Was there a moment at any point in your journey as an artist where you really felt super discouraged, like I don't know if this is something I want to continue doing, or was it always kind of just something like no matter what happens I still feel like I can keep going?
Yeah, there's definitely been a couple times because like even right now with event planning, it's very stressful. And then I'm like, how can I balance, you know, school, my personal life, my business, and I didn't have an assistant yet. So now I'm like, you know what? It's worth it to get an assistant because it takes stress off my shoulders, and then I can create more without being uncomfortable in my space, thinking I can't enjoy what I love to do because it's too much of a business now. Um, yeah.
What is the difference like? Because I know there has to be a difference. Again, obviously you have the monetary gain of, you know, your art now being a business, but there also has to probably be another side where it's like now it's a little bit stressful. It's like, okay, well, if I don't sell these paintings and that money's not coming in, does it change at all? Because I've heard people say like, oh, my art feels like, well, there's a song that I heard, it was like, nah, my art feels like work now. Does that ever creep in, or you always just feel like I'm grateful for the fact that I can do something I love and get paid for it?
It definitely feels like work sometimes, especially when I have to do a whole, you know, set of paintings for one event. So it's like I'm kind of pushing myself to create the art, and it's not flowing from me naturally. And I feel like the best pieces do flow. So that's why I feel like separating the business part from me and just getting my assistant to handle all the stuff I don't need to handle will mean I don't have to be discouraged again to do something because I have someone who's reliable working on the business side of it for me, or you know, doing my taxes and stuff like that, so I'm not, you know, counting numbers, you know, trying to figure out my QuickBooks. I'm just like, you know what, this is handled by somebody I trust, and now I could just create the art. But you know, there's so many ways you can get discouraged with art. You know, I've had many people who have asked to buy a painting. I would put it on hold, and they wouldn't buy it. You know, so now I'm at that point where I'm like, you know what, I had to kind of switch my policies around. Like, if you want me to hold a painting, then you have to put a deposit down. If not, then no, because you're making me lose out on customers. And I used to do that in the past, but I'm like, at the end of the day, I feel like most of my pieces are gonna sell, and I don't have to try to make a quick flip off a painting. I could wait. So if you aren't ready for it now, fine. But also, I have to understand that my audience may not be able to afford $1,000 painting right away. So right now, for next year, I'm actually going to get afterpay for my artwork, so people can split a payment. So I'm definitely listening to what I'm seeing, and I'm adjusting to make sure everyone is able to actually buy something from me, and I feel like it's not accessible.
Yeah, that's super dope, and the price is going up. And that again, I think that's a super dope thing to again be in one stage and say, okay, now I'm selling these paintings, and just to be able to literally track like, yo, my price is going up. I think that's a super cool thing. Now, moving forward, what can people expect from you? Because obviously you're going to continue to do what you do. You've mentioned some things you're planning on doing, but what are some of the things going into, actually, before we get to that, what is, because the year's over, right? We're taping this on, what is it, the 29th? All right, I'm trying to get it out the next day, right? So what's the biggest lesson you took from the year 2021?
My biggest lesson, I would say, to follow my ideas as soon as I get them, because there are certain things I wanted to do that I was like, oh, let me wait. Maybe I shouldn't do this right away. I would have did a poetry brunch way earlier in the year if I wasn't thinking so much into it, and I feel like it would have been successful. But I waited till the end of the year because I was like, let me make sure there's nothing I need to tweak. But I'm like, if I put a little bit more time or got a little bit more help and invested in the help, I would have been able to do a lot more sooner. You know.
Okay.
So.
All right. Now, moving forward, going into 2022, what are you looking to do? What are you looking to build on? What are some things that you can share with us that you have coming down the pike that you're like, I'm super excited about this?
So I'm trying to do my poetry brunches every 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
I'm going to start teaching paint nights. I started teaching private paint lessons. I'm doing that, offering that for couples as well. Um, let's see. I'm planning a fashion show for next year as well with my summer clothing line coming out. And what else? Let's see. I'm planning on doing pop up shops in Boston once I learn how to make sure I do the permits correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is what I have planned
Man,
for next year.
that's super dope. And like, how do you feel just in the position you're at right now? Like, how does it feel to be like, okay, I have all of these things going on? Are you feeling like, man, I'm super happy? Are you feeling like I'm super hungry? Both other things. Like, how do you feel right now?
I'm definitely happy because I've been wanting to do this for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm finally seeing the energy I put into everything I wanted to do come into life.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
That's super dope. And I think again, for anybody who's thinking about anything you're passionate about, this has to be a testament to just go for it.
Yeah.
That's something that for me throughout this year, I've seen more and more of just people going for the things that they really love to do. Because at the end of the day, nobody probably knows how hard you work at this, right? How many hours a day do you say you put into creating this art?
Sometimes I'm painting for at least 10 hours a day.
That's a lot. Right? Most
Yeah.
people don't even work that much at their job, right? So that's a lot of effort to be putting in. That's a grind. Like, it's something you have to do. But when you're passionate about it, it's not going to feel like work all the time. And I think that's something that I've realized this year. And I think that if anybody's really on the fence about it, go for it. Because, again, you're a living testament to what it can do, not only for you, but literally for so many people. I wish you guys would have seen just the crowd, like the environment, the energy, just felt it. Like, it was just, the vibrations were amazing. The fact that you're going to be doing those brunches every 2 to 3 months, I encourage anybody, if you're in the Boston area, come out. Even if you don't know anything about art, come. It's a great time, great energy, food's bussing. Maybe you'll learn a thing or two and pick up some pieces, because like I said, it was one of the highlights of my year. So it was definitely a dope thing. I'm super glad you were able to come on the podcast and really just give us a lot of gems, sauce, just value. So where can people find you? Instagram, Facebook, where can people find you at?
Yeah, so my Instagram, my Facebook, it's all Poetic Artiste or The Poetic Artiste.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So definitely check her out on Instagram. Is it The Poetic Artiste? So ThePoeticArtiste.
Tiste.
There we go. Listen, I'm out of school now. I don't know how to spell. But definitely make sure you tap in with Leslie, guys. She's doing a lot of great things. If you're in Boston, make sure you check out kind of the events you're doing. Do you ship? So paintings, if someone wanted to buy a painting, do you ship them out?
I do, absolutely.
Okay, so if you're in the U.S., go ahead and buy yourself a painting. But once again, thank you for coming on. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, go ahead, add it to your queue, favorite it, and give me some feedback, guys. Make sure you follow Leslie, give me a follow, and let me know what you guys think. Y'all have a blessed 2022.